but we have to do it for our tart. There's 3 types of meringue: French, Swiss, and Italian. Okay, they're all the same: 2 parts sugar, 1 part egg whites, more or less. Okay, French meringue is raw sugar, raw egg whites. Italian meringue and Swiss meringue are both cooked. Italian meringue, you cook the sugar and pour it into the egg whites. Swiss meringue, you cook the egg whites and sugar over a water bath. Okay, some people like to cook their eggs, so usually if you're applying meringue to something that you're not baking and it's going right on something that's ready to eat, you use a cooked meringue like Swiss or Italian. If you're baking it, like in little cookies, then you can just make a French meringue and put it in the oven because it's getting baked anyway, so there's no need to go through the extra step of doing the Italian for the Swiss. Okay. 140 grams of sugar, 120 grams of egg whites. Okay, it's very important when you put your sugar in, your pot is clean. And what you're going to do, the recipe gives you a specific amount of water, but you're cooking the sugar to a certain temperature. So it really doesn't matter how much water's in there as long as the sugar's wet. But if you fill it up with too much water, it's going to take a long time for all that water to evaporate. Because when the sugar is at 240 degrees, it's going to have evaporated a certain amount of water. So for the water, it's approximately 30%, but I just go over to the sink and add enough water to moisten the sugar.
Have you already done it?
No, not yet. And I put the water in there carefully because I don't want sugar crystals on the side of the pot, because if you do, it's more likely to crystallize in the cooking process. And once you get some sugar crystals, the whole thing's more likely to crystallize. Okay, so enough sugar just to cover, enough water just to cover the sugar. Okay, and if the sugar is dry like that, okay, just take your hand in there and make sure all the sugar is moistened. Okay? Okay, you don't want any sugar on the side of the pot. So don't, and remember this, because I know someone's going to do it. Do not stir it, do not swirl it, do not swish it around. Put the water in there carefully, right on the stove on relatively high heat. That's it. Do not stir it, swish it around, swirl it, whisk it, anything. Just right on the heat. Meringue is when our sugar reaches 240 degrees, which is referred to as softball. Softball stage. Some people do 250, between 240 and 250. Softball stage, hardball stage, soft crack, hard crack. It all refers to the state of the sugar when it cools down. So if the sugar, if you're going to cook the sugar to 240 degrees and pour it on the table, when it cools down, you'd be able to form it into a softball. Okay. So before they knew the temperatures or whatever, you can refer to the stage of the sugar with the cool consistency. So you do that with a thermometer. If you don't have a thermometer, you can take your fingers in some cold water, pick up some of the sugar back in the cold water, and just test the sugar like that. Okay, or you can take a drop of the sugar in the water. Okay, but when you're doing that, you have to make sure that the fingers that go in the sugar get dipped in ice water first. Otherwise, you might burn yourself. Okay, so just do it carefully. I'll show you how it's done. It's a little weird to do it the first time, but once you've done it, it's no problem. You just have to quickly in here, in the sugar, back in the water, and you'll be able to see if the sugar's cooked enough. Okay, the sugar will first boil at 212 degrees, then it'll start to get a little thicker. The bubbles will get a little tighter and closer together. That's when I know it's kind of getting close. But in the beginning, you're not really going to know. Okay, but you can always, again, if you have a good thermometer, you can use a thermometer. But your little meat thermometers don't go up to 240, so they won't work. Okay, so we want that to come up to the softball. At the same time, we want our egg whites to whip to some volume. Okay, you don't want to pour your sugar in the egg whites when they're not whipped. Otherwise, your meringue will not be light and fluffy, it'll be dense and heavy. Okay, so you have to have some volume in your egg whites before you add the sugar. So you kind of have to watch the sugar, watch the egg whites. If the egg whites are done, better to run down the side of the bowl than hit the beater. If you hit the beater, it splatters everywhere on the outside of the bowl.